Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I head out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, hello listeners, good morning. It is a lovely day here in suburban Chicago. The weather is quite nice. It is in the high 30s Fahrenheit, which is crisp and cool. I definitely have a jacket and hat on, but not unpleasantly cold, and there's hardly any wind. So it's a perfect day for taking a walk. Now I'm taking a walk because I don't have to go into campus today, so it's a walk at home, get some exercise, and send a podcast your way. So I hope that you are having a lovely December. I am furiously cranking out episodes to try to reach my goal of getting to episode 400 before I take my winter hiatus, but we'll see if that's possible. I will have to be quite aggressive in my publication schedule because it's already December 10th and I still have more than 10 episodes to go, and I usually take my hiatus somewhere around the 20th. So we'll see. I might end up doing a couple episodes in January just to finish, even though it'll be sort of during my hiatus. We'll see. But I do have an episode for you today. It's all ready to go, and it's a delight. So the episode I want to share today is a duel. I haven't done a duel for a while, and it's a flip and write duel. That's right. You've all been waiting for it. It's something there's clamor for. I hear it. You hear it in the bushes and the trees and the wind. It's Pick Up and Deliver's duel, Cartographers versus Welcome to. Dun, dun, dun. Now, if you are a longtime listener to Pick Up and Deliver, you know that both of these games have a regular place on my gaming table and in the conversations on this podcast. I think both games are fantastic and really good. And to be honest, before I did this podcast, which I haven't done it yet, I don't know which game I think is better. I haven't come to that conclusion yet, and I'm going to walk through it with you today. So while in some previous episodes of Duel, I will confess, I kind of knew going in which one probably was going to win. This one, I genuinely don't. So I'm going to be talking through some key issues, five key categories. For those of you who haven't heard of Pick Up and Deliver Duel before, what I do is I pick two games that are similar in some significant way, and I pick out usually 5 criteria on which to judge those games. And then I talk about how each game fits those criteria, and then I use that to decide which game I think is better. So that's what we're going to do. I always start, this is not criteria, this is just description, with a brief description of each game in case you're unfamiliar with them. We'll start with Cartographers. Cartographers is from Thunderworks Games and published by the designer Jordy Allen. Cartographers is a flip and write game in which you are a cartographer working on behalf of the queen somebody in a fantasy realm, trying to map some of her land that has not yet been mapped. Now, the theme breaks down at that point because narratively, she says, hey, I want you to find a village in this shape, and then you draw one on your map, which doesn't really make a lot of sense. I mean, honestly, the narrative should be that you're lazy cartographers and you don't actually want to go exploring. So when she tells you the things she wants you to find, you just sit in a pub and draw them on your map. That's in my headcanon, that's what's happening. It breaks down a little bit, but it is really cool. So the mapping, you have these cards that you flip over that are tetromino shapes or polyomino shapes, and they give you usually one or one of 2 different terrain types, and then you're going to draw that shape on your map. Each terrain type is tied to one of the scoring cards, and there are 4 scoring cards that will score like Isle of Skye. They score first scoring card A and B, then B and C, then C and D, and in the 4th round, A and D. So each scoring card is going to score twice in a predictable order, and as the cartographer, you can see which one is going to score when, and you can plan ahead for it. Each round, there is also all the cards get shuffled up, and they return in interesting order. There is also an interactive element in which a monster comes up, and then someone else draws on your board. We'll talk about that a little more later. So that's Cartographers. The game ends after 4 rounds, and the person who's earned the most points wins. Welcome to is also a flip and write game, and I'm talking about here the base game, which is sometimes called Welcome to Your Dream Home, but the original title is Welcome to, and then an ellipses. I don't know why, except that There's these number of movies like Welcome to Pleasantville or Welcome to Centerville. So the idea is that you get to name your subdivision. In the game, you are planning a 1950s style suburban subdivision. And what you're doing is, I think, building the houses or planning them in a way that there are 3 streets in increasing length. And on your turn, you're going to write a number on one of the houses that you're numbering the house. And then you are going to, over the course of the game, you're going to put the houses in order, and you're also going to be activating a variety of other mini games. You're building parks on some of those streets, you're building pools in the backyards of some of those houses, you are fencing off different groups of houses, and then there are a bunch of set scoring conditions. So the number of pools that you build gives you a scoring condition. The number of parks that you build gives you a certain scoring condition. The size of the housing blocks that you blocked off with fences gives you a condition. And then there are also 3 like city planning goals that you can try to meet. And if you're the first one to meet them, you get a higher score. And if you meet them secondary, you get a lower score. The game ends when someone's met all 3 of those planning conditions, or somebody has filled up their whole map, or somebody's had 4 rounds where they could not fill in any of the available cards. I didn't tell you how you pick your card. In Cartographers, there's 1 card, everybody fills it in. In Welcome to, you get 3 pairs of cards, where you get a card with a number on it, and then another card with one of the icons for one of those mini games I was talking about. And so you have to take the number and the mini game. Then you have to write the number on your street, and of course the numbers have to go in order from low to high on one of the three streets. So the way that you might not, in Cartographers, you might not be able to play something because you don't have room for the shape. In Welcome to, you might not be able to play something because you have nowhere you can put that number. So if you filled in 5, 6, 7 on all 3 of your streets, and the numbers that come up are 5, 6, and 7, you literally can't pick one of the 3 card pairs, and thus you are doomed. So hopefully that gives you a sense of how Welcome to works. And again, scoring at the end, and the player with the highest points wins. So let's get to comparing. Let's get to the duel. All right, the first duel is the theme. In Cartographers, like I said, you are a lazy map maker, or you are a real map maker, in which case the theme makes no sense at all. If you're a real map maker exploring the world, the theme makes no sense because you get to decide where stuff goes. And that's just not how the active cartography works. You don't get to pick where stuff goes, because the game doesn't say you're planning how the queen will use this empty space. You're not, it could have been themed around, it could be themed around the planet builders from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. You could be Slartibartfast, and you could be building a planet. That would make sense. The theme as written in the rulebook in Cartographers does not make sense. Like I said, in my headcanon, you are lazy cartographers sitting in a pub, drawing your maps and hoping you'll come up with a map that most satisfies the queen. However, Welcome to is equally problematic. In Welcome to, it's not entirely clear who you are. If you're a builder, the fences between houses seem weird. That part seems like there are just some things that just feel like an odd yield to the need for a way to score things, which is fine. That's the way games work, but it's problematic. It also has a problem in that the design and feel of the game is aimed at 1950s Americana, the era of the rise of the planned suburban community, which was, of course, also the era of very explicit government-endorsed racist policy designed to allow white middle-class people to gather and maintain wealth, and designed to deny that same possibility to black homeowners. It's the era of redlining, and while the game certainly does not include any of that in the way it's structured, in fact, other than the builder on the cover of the box, the builder and the real estate agent, there's no people in the game at all. It's still of an era, and it doesn't address the inequities that were part of the era, which means that it endorses them. That when you look back nostalgically on a time, you are saying that time was great. And the game is certainly built on this 1950s nostalgia. Now, it's not super intense. It's not a game that has me rolling in discomfort the way that a colonialist game does more often. But it's not ideal in terms of its theme. So both games have positives and negatives about the theme. If I'm going to pick one, I think I like Cartographer's theme better. It fits it's easier to enjoy if I don't think about it too much. And even if I do think about it, it's easily restructured. Welcome to, I think that theme, it could have been something different and it would have been just as fun. All right, the second thing I want to bring up is the depth of choice that the game provides you. Now again, these games are somewhat different. They both use the flip and write mechanism, in which you have a deck of cards and you're flipping over a card and that determines what you're going to write. In Cartographers, you get a big map that has a grid of spaces that you can use. And at the beginning of the game, you can write your shape anywhere you want on the map. Now, there are these mountains that you get points if you surround them, and there are other places where the game might give you choice. It also sometimes gives you choices in the card itself. It'll give you two different shapes, one that's a little bigger and one that's a little smaller, and usually the smaller one then comes with a coin, which is this currency that is used for a bunch of different stuff, but it can also earn you points. And so there's an interesting balance to be woven there as you think about how to best use whatever option has come up. Also, sometimes the card will give you multiple choices about which terrain type you're going to draw. So then you have to decide, which card am I going to try to add to my score for, based on those terrain types that the game gives you. Lots of choice at the heart of Cartographers, but the same is true of Welcome to. In Welcome to, you get a lot of choice through a couple different mechanisms. First of all, like I said before, you get three choices about what you're going to flip and write. So you have three different options about what you're going to choose. Now, each option comes with its own limitations. There's a number and a mini game associated with each of the three options that you have to pick. And of course, you have to use that number in order to take that option. So sometimes you don't actually have the option of all three. It would be really nice if the game had some way to let you accumulate and then spend a flexibility bonus like Cascadia does, where you have these pairs, but then in Cascadia you get this little acorn token, and if you spend the acorn token, then you can take one tile and a different animal chip from a different pairing. Welcome to does not have that kind of option. It's just got three pairings, and you're going to take the card and the associated minigame. So sometimes you actually won't even be able to use that minigame. Two of the minigames are extremely situational, and one of them is pretty situational. So of the 6 minigames, several of them, you literally could take them and not have any use at all. However, like Cartographers, the game does give you a lot of flexibility in trying to figure out where you're going to put your numbers in order to best match the goals that you're aiming for. So as I think about choice, the flexibility of choices, what kind of choices you have, I think I'm going to give it to Cartographers again. I think the choices at the heart of Welcome to are pretty interesting, but often they are limited in a way that Cartographers, especially early on in the game, you just have a lot of flexibility about how you want to approach puzzles in a way that Cartographers is not quite as strong. Now, if you're playing the full game of Cartographers, or of Welcome to, where you have the access to roundabouts, which allow you to split your streets in half, or split your streets, that does provide another level of analysis that's there. But ultimately, I think I'm gonna say I like the choices in Cartographers better. So Cartographers, 2 for 2. All right. So next one I want to talk about is interactivity. So both Cartographers and Welcome to have a level of interactivity. When Cartographers first came out, part of the review media landscape pointed out that it seemed to be the first game that had a real piece of interactivity, direct interactivity in the monster cards. So the way Cartographers work, you have this small deck of cards that are these polyomino shapes. There's like a deck of like 12 or 15 of these. And each round you add one monster card to that deck. And you're only going to draw like 5 of those 15 cards. So you may not draw the monster card. If you don't draw it, it stays in there. And then the next round you add another one. And so there's 2 in there. So you kind of end up having 2 or 3 come out at the same time if you get really unlucky. But the way the monster card works, it comes out, it shows you a shape. These are the monsters. And then the way you play them is it shows a shape, and then it shows a direction, a circular direction with arrows to say you're going to pass clockwise or counterclockwise. And you pass your map to the person on your left or right, and they draw the monster shape on your map. And the thing is, at the end of each season, For every empty space that's orthogonally adjacent, meaning horizontally, vertically adjacent to a monster square, you lose a point. So one of those monster shapes coming in as like the second to last card in a round can be devastating. It can also really screw up some of your plans if you have plans to, like one of the cards has you connecting a mountain to another mountain with a bank of forests, and you could use a monster to cut off that connection, for example. The interactivity with the monster cards is incredibly direct. You are taking someone else's map and writing on it. By contrast, Welcome to has the more traditional Euro-style passive interactivity in which we are both competing for a thing and whoever gets it first gets it. Now, because you're all taking your turns at the same time, in Welcome to, you and I could both get the same goal in the same turn. And if we do, we both get the points. The game is just like, sure, you both got it this round. But it does have the first person to get a thing gets the top score, and then the next one gets gets a much lower score. It also does have an element where you are competing with the other players. The orange construction mini game, the person who has the most of those at the end of the game gets a certain number of points, and the second most gets the next number, and so on. So those are the two ways that Welcome to is interactive. I guess technically the third way would be the first person to complete one of those big planning cards that I talked about gets the choice of either letting the deck run out and then get reshuffled, or they could reshuffle the deck right away, which screws up all of the any statistical analysis or card counting anyone's been doing gets screwed up if you reshuffle. But those are the three kinds of interactivity. So now, I said I was rating these games on interactivity, by which I mean, how do I like the interactivity? And I far prefer the Welcome to interactivity. I don't like in Cartographers. I mean, I recognize that it's a great game element, and if I'm playing really competitively, sure. But most of the time I play Cartographers, I'm playing with my wife, and my goal is to have fun, and I want to get the best score I can. I want her to get the best score she can, and it doesn't feel good to directly go do a thing that screws up her score. I don't like it. So the monster cards are not my favorite in Cartographers. Thus, for interactivity, I say Welcome to is the better game. All right, we've talked about choices, we've talked about theme, we've talked about interactivity. So the next one I want to talk about is growth. And this one, oh man, this is tough. So we have Cartographers and we have Welcome to. Both games have incredible amounts of room for growth. By growth, I mean, as you play, you can learn to get better at the game. On the one hand, Welcome to is about tactical play in a lot of really significant ways. There certainly are strategies, and sometimes in Welcome to, you win the game by picking a strategy and running for it whenever you have the opportunity. That's when I win, that's often how I win. But there are times where you don't get the cards you need in order to do that. Like sometimes there's a card that allows you to one of the city planning goals, for instance, will be related to building pools. Well, that's great, but if you never get the pairs you need to fill in the pools, it becomes very difficult to gain that score. Now, I will say, I'm bad at the game. I don't use roundabouts probably as much as I should. I don't know that I plan all that well. So it's hard for me to tell that, but there is a lot of room for growth, and people who are good at Welcome to can get a lot of points. At the same time, it is very tactical, and there's a strong element of luck in that you can't control which pairs of cards that come up, and just sometimes you will have made a decision and the cards that come up do not help your decision. And that is a rough spot to be in. So Welcome to, definitely room for getting better. Hard to say how much. Cartographers is a more strategic game. You definitely can still get just wrecked by the bad luck of the game. A monster comes up at the wrong time, or you decide to lean into one of the card types and then you just don't see very many cards that allow you to answer that. So in that way, Cartographers is also very tactical. It does generally have a set of scoring conditions that allow you to satisfy something with each kind of card that comes up. Now, as the game goes on, that becomes less possible. Once you're in round 3 and scoring condition B is never going to be touched again, if that was the one about forests, then forests become pretty useless. But there's enough flexibility in the system that you really can aim for different cards, and some people are very, very good at this game and get really high scores. That said, I also feel like the ability to grow is not I don't feel like it's quite as high, in part because the strategy in the game is to assess the scoring conditions when they come out, particularly the C, D, and A conditions, and figure out which one of them has the most potential to get you points if you really lean into it early, and then to chase that one. You may do okay in rounds A and B, but if you've been really leaning into C, D, or A by the time you get to the third round and you're scoring C and D and A, if D was the one you were leaning into, you can get just a ton of points. And as much as I feel like both games depend on tactical strategy, I feel like Cartographers, that is really the strategy to win. And while there are other things that create nuance with it, I feel like most of the time that is the thing that becomes really crucial, is evaluating those scoring cards, picking one or two of them that you're going to lean into, and really chasing them. And so from that perspective, I think I'm going to say Welcome To has more room for growth or gaining skill as a player, although it is a razor thin margin. So I've talked about choices and themes, I've talked about interactivity, and I've talked about growth. And as I recall, we're kind of tied now, right? That themes I gave to Cartographers, choice I gave to Cartographers, interactivity, definitely Welcome To, growth, very thin margin, Welcome To. Which leads me to my final evaluation element, which is expansions. So each game has a number of expansions available. I just got the Cartographers Heroes set, so I have a bunch of expansions for that game that I haven't gotten a chance to try yet. And I have, over the last couple years, bought all of the... Actually, when they did a Kickstarter for them, I kickstarted and backed all of the alternate maps for Welcome To. And both games have their positives and negatives. The positives and negatives are kind of the same for both, which is when you're adding in one more thing, it pushes up the complexity to a level where it's not appropriate for beginners. You really don't want to do that unless people have been playing a lot before, because it just adds one more thing you need to think about. Cartographers Heroes, or the Cartographers expansions, I mean, there are different maps, which feels very much similar to the ones in Welcome To, but then they also have these skills that you can get that allow you to spend coins to manipulate your map. They have heroes who are kind of like the monsters, but they're characters that come into the board that can manipulate the board a little bit. And like I said, they have these 3 alternate maps, which each have slightly different rules and slightly different scoring conditions. By contrast, Welcome To has, I think, 5 different expansion maps. There's a Doomsday one, like a 50s Doomsday. There's a Zombie Apocalypse, which sounds pretty close to Doomsday, but they are differently themed. There's an Easter one, there is a Halloween one, and there's a Christmas or holiday themed one. That's 5. There might be a summer one too. I can't recall. I don't think there is. So I think there's 5 different expansion maps, and each one comes with a small set of alternate scoring cards, so you can swap in one of the scoring cards to be theme specific, and each one has an extra set of rules that tack onto the map. And like I said, these add a level of complexity that's not appropriate for new players. So like Cartographers, they are limited in the scope that you can use them. It is again a tight race. And I will admit, I'm more familiar with the Welcome To expansions than the Cartographers ones. Up until the Deluxe Collector's Edition arrived a couple weeks ago, I had not seen or played with all of the material from the Cartographers expansion the way I had for the other. So that part is less great for me. So what do I think of the games overall? Or which one do I say wins in terms of the expansion? I gotta give it to Welcome To. And here's why. The Welcome To thematic maps, they provide just enough a flavor of difference that allows for new play with a little bit of new rules, but nothing too outrageous. It doesn't involve another teach, just an explanation of 1 or 2 more scoring conditions. The theme on the maps is totally different. It looks totally fun, and they work out really well. By contrast, the Cartographers, the skills and the heroes, they're complex in a way that is not as intuitive, and consequently just not quite as good for me. So I think in the end, I gotta say, with the expansion maps for Welcome To are slightly better than the expansion materials for Cartographers, which means that with a razor thin edge, I declare Welcome To be a better game than Cartographer. I would say come at me if you disagree, but honestly, on another day, I might rule the other way. Like they're very close in my head, and it was maybe not right to have them dual, but that's what I do here on Pick Up and Deliver. So in that regard, I'm curious, have you played Cartographers? Have you played Welcome to? What do you think of those games? Which one do you like better? Head over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and share your thoughts on these games with me there and with the other Pick Up and Deliver fans. I'd also like to hear from you personally. If you're interested, you can email me, brendan@rattleboxgames.com. You can send me a message through Board Game Geek. My username there is wombat929. Or if you wanted to play a game with me, I play games asynchronously on Boîte à Jeux, Board Game Arena, and yukata.de. And my username in all of those places is also wombat929. I thank you for joining me on my duel today, and I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.